very good morning to you. We're coming to you from a very sunny London. You're listening to Monocle on Sunday with me, Emma Nelson. And coming up on today's programme, my guests will share their views on the week's biggest story. Vincent, McAviney and David Bodanis are joining me in the studio. Good morning. David, what have you spotted?
I was excited to see that African leaders are pointing out, finally and once again, that maps of the world are wildly inaccurate. If you look at the standard map, Africa's tiny and Greenland is huge. But in reality, because it's near the equator, Africa's really, really big. And a map that shows that fairly will kind of make sense of the large population coming up.
Thank you for that. We'll also head to Helsinki for the latest headlines from our correspondent in the region, Petri Burtsoff.
Russian hackers hijack a dam in Norway, consumption of bottled water doubles in Finland, and Lithuania teaches its children how to build and fly drones. I'm Monocle's Helsinki correspondent Petri Burtsoff, and I'll be looking at what's making the news in Northern Europe.
Thank you, Petri. Plus, we'll hear from our editorial director, Tyler Brûlé, who's on the road in Galicia in Spain. It's the 17th of August, 2025. Live from London, this is Monocle on Sunday.
Live from London, this is Monocle on Sunday with Emma Nelson.
And a very good morning to you and to our panellists too. Monocle Radio regular and journalist Vincent McAviney. Morning, Vinny.
Good morning.
And David Bodanis, speaker, business advisor, author of The Art of Fairness, The Power of Decency in a World Turned Mean. Good morning, David. How are we both this morning? It's sunny in London. August is giving us its greatest gift, I would say.
Yeah, we're in the
nice
sort of tail of this fourth heat wave of the summer in the UK. It's been pretty lovely, actually. There is, I think, I have to stick around in August for work reasons. And if you get a sunny, warm British summer, it is joyous, and London looks at its best, and the parks and everything are just wonderful.
I discovered the Oasis Swimming Centre this week.
It's great, isn't it?
It's unbelievable.
Right by Covent Garden.
For those of us who've never been, this is an outdoor Lido in
literally the centre of London.
Literally in the centre of London. Beautiful 1970s architecture, sun deck, sauna, garden, all looked over by the local council estate.
Yeah.
It's brilliant fun. That's what I discovered this week. How about you, David? What was your week about?
I was finding that the days are getting remarkably shorter. It's the warm weather. I know. Because I thought, well, okay, in June I'll take advantage of it. I love taking long walks in the evening along the canal or other places in London. And the evenings are closing in. And I thought, once again, have I done enough this year?
Oh, my goodness. Is that what you think when you go for walks? Have I done enough this year?
No, mostly I look at the little duckies. I really do. And because they're my friends and they look so hopeful and they don't realize what's in store.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that. Let's head to Galicia in Spain, to our editorial director, Tyler Brûlé, who's in San Censo. A very good morning to you, Tyler. You're in a place that's spelt with two X's.
Two X's and much controversy, whether it's San Censo or San Henko, depending on who you speak to. Locals will call it San Censo, and the locals say that it's pretentious people from Madrid who pronounce it otherwise. But anyway, this is a wonderful little point, not far from Pontevedra, very close to Vigo. It's one bay over from Vigo, so and it's really it's Galicia at its best. And this is, many say this is a version of Saint-Tropez. It doesn't quite look like Saint-Tropez, but it might have the Spanish equivalent crowd. So if you think that, of course, there are many, fancy Spanish families and royals, etc., who like to go to San Sebastian, this would be the competition. Of course, this is also the domain of the Ortega family, of Inditex fame. So it's interesting who gathers here.
It's quite fun. I don't know if you've taken a glance at the local the sort of like the local Daily Trumpet. I think it's called the Olive Press, which is a delightful thing. And it does actually have an article where they don't want tourists to come, and so they've used graffiti to say tourists go to Zara and then go home. How do you feel about that headline?
This I missed, but I have to say they'd be talking to their fellow countrymen, because you don't see any foreign license plates here. It is maybe the odd P license plate from Portugal sneaks across the border, but it's very much a Spanish experience here. So I was in various points around the region yesterday, and there's no Dutch to be heard. There is no German. There is no French, and this is the remarkable thing. So if they're trying to chase people away, those people already have, ample numbers of Zara shops wherever they've come from, if they're in Alicante, Valencia, or Bilbao.
So what takes you to San Xenxo, even though I'm probably saying it wrong?
You're not saying it wrong. Actually, one of our regular contributors, Sagra Macea de Rosen, it was her husband's birthday. So, of course, Sagra is a regular voice on Monocle Radio. And her husband had a birthday last night, and it was a cozy affair for about 80 people on their balcony. And it was absolutely delightful. We drove up from Lisbon yesterday, and it'll be heading back to Lisbon very shortly.
How is this? How is the Suzuki Jimmy? It is the Jimmy that's doing this, isn't it?
It is.
How's it getting on?
I think these wheels. I think the Suzuki never thought that it was going to have a summer quite like this. I don't think anyone ever sort of told this little vehicle at the start of the year that it would be. Moving to the Iberian Peninsula. So our listeners will recall a couple of weeks ago, there was the grand journey from Zurich all the way down to Lisbon via San Sebastian. And this is one of the things I touched on in my column. It's not the shortest drive to get up from Lisbon up to Galicia. These are sort of regions which are quite well related, you could say. So, but they're not well connected. So, the rail journey, you could take the train to Porto, and then there's a bit of an old chugger that takes you up to Vigo. That's a bit of a production. And then if you want to fly, any pilgrims, any Portuguese pilgrims, any Portuguese pilgrims from the Lusophone world who might want to make their way up to Santiago to do the Camino. Very difficult to get to Santiago, which is probably the biggest airport in Galicia as well. And it's one of the things I posed in my column today. Maybe there's, it's time for better connectivity, a better sort of north-south axis than currently exists. Train, various portions of funding being allotted right now. It's going to take a while. So someone's going to have to buy a couple of ATRs and set up a cozy little airline, I think.
It's a funny balance to strike, because having just experienced some time on the west coast of France in a place which probably isn't a million miles from where you are in terms of theme, a sort of a gentle local bolt hole for the French. One of the big problems that the locals have experienced is that there is now a super fast connection between Paris and Arcachon, and it means that all the houses are being bought up by Parisians, and locals are finding themselves that they are no longer that they are priced out. Accessibility and connectivity is absolutely essential, but one sometimes wonders at what price.
Yeah, exactly. I was having a very brief conversation yesterday with the mayor of Santiago, and one of course, the issues as mayor, she has to, of course, deal with, the issue of tourism or over-tourism. But I had to remind her, I said, Santiago, you invented modern tourism. You invented the pilgrimage. So it's kind of rich many centuries later to say that we need to start turning it. So of course, it's not just pilgrims who are going to Santiago, but I said, this is the funny thing. You rewind the clock, and you are trying to, of course, bring them in their tens of thousands. Of course, centuries ago. And it is true, when you're in Santiago, it's incredible how many people the French Camino or the Portuguese version as well. And that's the interesting thing when you're in the region. You see, of course, people who are who can be many kilometers, hundreds of kilometers away, who are probably making their way due south or due north. This is obviously due north yesterday coming from Portugal, who are doing the walk.
Now, let's talk about wheels, not feet. I know that you wanted to talk. We've had the Jimmy, and bless the Jimmy, and we are so grateful for the Jimmy sort of ferrying you around the west coast of Europe this summer. But I want to talk about the front page, the front cover, of Monocle magazine. I remember a very, very long time ago, you laughing at me because I have a shopping trolley. Times have changed.
How times have changed. So, listeners, our September cover and much of the issue has a mobility theme, and this was one of these stories which has been it's been kicking around for a while, and we finally pulled it off, and it's turned into our cover story, and we have a handsome young gentleman who is towing a rolser, and that's ROLSER. And this, of course, is the four-wheel, Portuguese export superstar. So we might think that Cupra and Seat are, of course, the biggest four-wheel exports out of the country. Not true. And certainly when it comes to domestic consumption, almost 70% of Spanish households have a rolser shopping trolley. And, of course, everyone will be familiar with this. They can be up to, I think they can be up to 6 wheels as well, because you've got those special ones that you can drag up the stairs. But anyway, we're talking usually 2 or I think generally 4 wheels though. And of course, this is the shopping trolley, which yes, there are many knockoff versions, but this company is the global leader. And we've just told a story. Of course, it's a series of wonderful portraits, and sort of the success story of this family company and why it's growing, because of course, city centers are changing, pedestrianization. Many younger people, and this is what we depict in the story, many young people are simply not driving. They don't have cars. They don't have a Jimny which is not the biggest boot, but certainly if you have to go and do your shop. And Emma, listen, I mean, you can be a poster child for this, because the power of these things, and it's incredible when you go into a big Spanish department store like El Corte Inglés. I mean, it's really like being in sort of a proper vehicle showroom, and there are, every kind of, because I think we're probably exposed to a few types of rolsers in let's say, other export markets, but when you're in Spain, they take it very seriously. Do you want sort of, double freezer or freezer bags on the top and then space for the vegetables below? I mean, you can sort of reconfigure it. I mean, really, it's like buying a car. You'd go crazy at level B2 of El Corte Inglés.
What I find amazing is that actually for Christmas, I asked my husband for a rolser for my present. And I didn't just want any shopping trolley. It was just, we now have a rolser in the same way that, I don't know, years and years ago, you would talk about a Hoover, or when the name of the brand actually supplants the actual name of the object itself, and we now don't talk about it as the shopping trolley. We talk about it as the rolser. It's actually become embedded in our vernacular.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that is very much, of course, what this company is trying to build on. Spain has, of course, done a very good job of course, developing. Extraordinary brands, and of course, many outstanding culinary and also wine, and you could also say beer brands as well. And this is, of course, another expression. One side, of course, of just of Spanish manufacturing, that Spain. This is, it has a proper auto industry. It has an aviation sector. Spain still builds ships. And now they want you to know that, yes, you can probably go to a Chinese 5 and dime shop and buy a version of a shopping trolley, but it's not a rolser. And that is the main point. And it's not sort of proudly made in Spain or made in Europe. And these, of course, are the values that they're trying to push. And it's just, and again, it's a heartwarming also story of entrepreneurship and a great family business.
I'm not 100% sure I'm actually listening to this. I'm slightly pinching myself on this one. Is one coming back to do Forstrasse 90 at the weekend?
Well, listen, maybe next time we see you in Paris, Emma, you won't be surprised if there's maybe a few of them in our product development department, because it can't be too far off that there's going to be a rolser Monocle special collab.
I can't wait. We can go for a walk together down the street.
Exactly.
See what people think. My goodness. All right. I'm going to let you get back to your shopping trolley tests. Have a good weekend and see you in Switzerland this week.
See you later this week. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you so much. I'm not sure I've just had that conversation. Anyone here am I the only one with a shopping trolley?
Yeah. I've got like hundreds of tote bags. That's my sort of go-to for shops these days.
David?
The shopping trolleys remind me of the problem with dating websites. Not that I know, but my younger friends tell me. The problem with dating websites is you want to say what will indicate the actual truth of the person, not a curated photograph of themselves or their room, but what is the brutal reality of their life. The inside of a shopping trolley when you're busy. That shows what you really care about and what your priorities are.
Okay, and so you don't have a shopping trolley, you have a rucksack. Vinny has 100 totes, which swing around as you try and get home, right?
Yep.
You need to get a trolley. So when you say that the inside of a shopping trolley is the gateway to the soul?
Totally, you see the truth. A friend of mine when she was dating, used to ask people, what's on page 127 of the book nearest you on your bedside table? And if they took a long time answering, she realized, oh my God, you don't have any books on your bedside table.
And what is on the inside of your trolley?
On the inside of my trolley is non-existent, but on the inside of my backpack is a little bit of high density chocolate for the things that you really need, and low density caramel for when you need the extra quick sugar, and a pen and another pen and some Kleenexes and spare paper, which I hardly ever use, and a sturdy laptop.
Excellent. No food though. Oh yeah, no, there's chocolate. How about you? What's in the tote bag?
I mean, I'd say my day-to backpack is a journalist backpack. It's extra power chargers, it's a laptop, it's makeup, it's stuff being able to stay overnight at the last minute, toothbrush, all that kind of stuff. So it is a bit like a camping trip backpack.
Excellent. Again, no food. Right. Thank you for that, gents. Welcome to Monocle on Sunday. Good to see you both in the studio. I think we've got to talk about straight away what happened in Alaska on Friday evening, or rather what didn't happen. This huge disappointment that there was no ceasefire announced, as if anyone was frankly that surprised. But now things move on apace. Today we have European leaders, the UK, Germany and France, all having a conference call to trying to work out what to do next. Zelensky's on his way to Washington tomorrow to see Donald Trump. And the main concern, isn't it, that Vladimir Putin has basically said, peace agreement, and I want Donbass. Who wants to start with that? Vinny?
I mean, I was up overnight covering this for the BBC, and it was interesting because when they came out to do the press conference, which was earlier than we'd expected, there was a problem where the translation wasn't running at the top. And we were also surprised that obviously it was Vladimir Putin speaking first and not the host, which is normal in diplomacy, Donald Trump. And for sort of the first 2 minutes, we weren't getting translation on the top. And then when it kicked in, I just thought, oh, we must have missed something. There was some kind of announcement. So I was trying to, on another computer, go back and find the translation at the top. But no, it was an absolute giant nothing burger. And as ever with Donald Trump, he just takes on board and makes his position whatever is the last thing that he has heard from the last person that he has spoken to. So after all of that work by European leaders, by President Zelensky with him in the week ahead, he seems to have rolled over. And we shouldn't be that surprised because he has the sort of strongman philosophy of history. He thinks that Putin is strong when really only small men appreciate strong men. And, you know, he was just rolling out the red carpet, the ride in the Beast, clapping when he arrived. It should have been clear from the get-go that whatever Putin spun to him, he was going to go along with, because it's now embarrassing how much he wants a Nobel Peace Prize. You know, that is the thing that sort of the Russians are trying to dangle out to him now. They're getting their proxies, the likes of, you know, India and others trying to say, oh, we're going to nominate Donald Trump as well for this. And he's so desperate to talk as well that he apparently is trying to, you know, nudge Norway by saying, oh, we might have to impose higher tariffs if I don't get this Peace Prize, allegedly, because he is so consumed with the man who lives rent-free in his head, President Obama, that he just wants to beat him in everything he can. And because Obama got one, he's desperate to have one, so he'll sacrifice all the sort of money, blood, soil that we've invested in defending Ukraine. He'll just throw it away for that little gold prize.
David, your views on your observations on both Putin and Trump in the last 48 hours. I mean, having written this book, The Art of Fairness, the Power of Decency in a World Turned Mean, one wonders whether you actually need to start rewriting it. Or not.
One of the things in the book was about long-term and short-term. And in the short-term, horribleness really, 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 really is effective. If somebody screams at me to get a taxi and I don't want to physically fight them, they'll get the taxi. They absolutely will win. In the short-term, great advantages. Long-term, it can be different. Mr. Trump lives very well in the short-term. I think one of the mistakes many people make with Mr. Trump, and which I made also, was you think it's somebody who has the office of the president. And there's something called the National Security Council, people, and there's advisors, and there's the CIA, and all these sorts of stuff. And you think it goes in and there's some sort of valuation. You watch the West Wing TV show or whatever. And then you realize, suppose none of that is true. Suppose there's a kleptocratic family and, like you said, somebody who lives with this hysteria of Barack Obama inside his head. Think of like a terrified little boy. You see, you can't quite imagine it's that simple. There must be some deeper intelligence or some consistency. And you find out that that isn't. And it's really hard not to think that there's Air Force One and people coming off and highly intelligent BBC and international TV analysts. And they're applying this to an unworthy vessel. And on the other side is somebody who knows how to pull strings really well.
So now we have this very, very, what is it? You know, the empty vessel that makes the most noise. But tell us about Putin, because I think even from the moment that they had set that meeting up on the red carpet, that was totally it was entirely performative.
So Putin, the one thing he is good at is judo. And I have the worst possible build for judo. But when I was younger, I studied it for many years with people who really knew their business. And in judo, you often, if you're watching a match, if you're with somebody who really knows what's going on, like a commentator or something, before somebody flies through the air, they'll say, oh, it's over. It turns out if one person gets their hand in a certain position and their hips are moving in a certain direction, lo and behold, it's inevitable what's going to happen. Being invited to Alaska like that, it was a beautiful judo move. So Putin is decent at judo, and he knows to getting in the right position before, from which all follows.
In fact, just on that point, the last time that Putin was in this country was in 2012 during the Olympics, and I was the producer when he visited Downing Street. You could tell he had zero time, zero interest in seeing David Cameron. He did the sort of shot at the door, shaking hands. They went inside number 10. We ran inside. And you could just tell that he was watching the clock because he was actually just there. He wanted to go to the Excel Centre where the judo was taking place, and he wanted to watch some judo. And then as soon as he did, our foreign secretary went with him trying to, make most of the opportunity. But he just was not interested in Britain at all and jetted out as soon as the judo was done. So he applies that philosophy of taking the other's strength and using it against them, which is what he does excellently.
Yes, and he always comes alive with judo. Judo works if two people are of similar size, or if one person's huge and one person's small. If the small person knows judo, they'll win. On the other hand, if they both know judo, Putin loses. So if the U.S. handled its military might properly, Russia would have no chance. Against somebody who's against a klutzy big person, you will win. And he loves that fantasy.
How does this apply to the reports that are coming out that Putin doesn't want a ceasefire, he just wants to go straight to an agreement, a peace agreement. And secondly, that he wants Donbass, which is militarily an advantage, but more importantly for Russia and for Ukraine, agriculturally it is huge.
I mean, if there's one thing Russia doesn't need more of, it's land. It is the largest country in the world. This is all psychological for him. It will not stop. It is this desperate need of grief for the USSR. I mean, you have Lavrov turning up in a USSR tracksuit, which was, quite
That was
absurd.
astonishing.
Quite astonishing fashion choices there. So part of it is this psychologist's mind of the collapse of the USSR was the greatest tragedy of the 20th century. He wants to try and reclaim some of that glory. But I do think he has really miscalculated in some ways, and that his personal obsession with Ukraine, where we know he spent his honeymoon and he thinks they should just be a part of them, has reinforced and rebolstered NATO everywhere else along Russia's border. Sweden, Finland joining NATO, the likes of Poland taking its defence spending up to over 5%. It did a massive military parade in Warsaw this week to show its strength. You have real unity. Those former, Eastern Bloc countries, which were part of the USSR and in the sort of 30 years since, have done everything possible to integrate themselves fully in the EU and NATO and make the kind of, not just sort of political but cultural links as well. It has made the people in those governments who used to say, we're doing this because we're wary that Russia will come back. That's what our history teaches us. People used to say, oh, you're being hyperbolic, you're sort of crying wolf, all that. That's not going to happen. You're with us now. Well, they have been proven right, and it's sort of locked together Europe in a way that I don't think Putin really properly understands, that, the deep hatred that it's cemented for him for the last, because it's not just the people in, yes, Ukraine has been under sort of incredible life and death, mortal combat for the last few years, but European people have, sacrificed a lot, huge energy bill prices, huge amounts of defense spending, and they do not want this to go ahead. They do not want Putin to be able to claim a victory.
The interesting thing that you say that is all these things that other countries have done, yet it has not changed Russia's path and Putin's path at all. And there's an article that we should draw people's attention to in the New York Times, this idea that Vladimir Putin is still, perhaps in the same way that Donald Trump is obsessed with Barack Obama, for him, his Obama is actually losing the Cold War.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Putin is of a generation, and maybe all of us too to some extent, where we have a notion that war is something that takes place, and at the end of the war, one side has really, 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 really won. Everybody knows the photographs of Berlin in 1945. The enemy is lying down there like a dog on its back, and one side has total victory. That's very rare. A more typical ending is two sides that really hate each other's guts and just for the moment can't attack each other. And they have this wary, really unpleasant truce, sort of like the War of the Roses film, with a squabbling couple. And that's more typical. So if, as you're pointing out, if Putin has a pause where he can regroup and Ukraine can't get strong NATO defenses and stuff, he'll just wait and irritate and attack and keep on going. Because it's not assuaged. In a situation like that, it's assuaged only when the other side is just as strong. North Korea does not like South Korea, but for a long time they couldn't invade. It's just you couldn't do it because of sheer force. It's sort of like, how do you deal with a bully? In the movies, you deal with a bully by changing his mind, or there's a big hug. In reality, you learn if you'll hit the bully. And the bully will still be there. He's not going to... Oh, and also in the movies, if you hit the bully once, he gives up. No, the bully gets really irritated and comes back with his friends. And you live in this really wary, unpleasant situation. People who live in bad neighborhoods are familiar with this.
Vincent, when we look ahead now to and you mentioned the fact that Donald Trump seems to have, he seems to agree with the view of the last person he spoke to.
Yeah.
We now have European leaders sitting down together this weekend. We have Britain, France and Germany having a conference call this afternoon. And then we also have Volodymyr Zelensky heading to Washington.
Yeah.
Is there a possibility that having been having been swayed by whatever Putin said to him in that room in Alaska for not very long, that we can now wonder whether Trump will be receptive to Europe and Ukraine again? Or whether whatever Putin said and whatever charms Putin meted out will actually rub off a little bit more long term on Trump.
I think it's all about incentives with him. And, Putin has made some, we think, ridiculous claims about how strong the Russian economy is. It's very much tractor production is up, this year, sort of very old school USSR. He flew in with business people. He's managed to put in Trump's head. I noticed in the Fox News interview that, Trump says, apart from China and the EU, Russia's the next big economy. It's not. It's not even near. Nowhere near. It's at the bottom of the top 20, essentially, if not further down. You can't really trust a statistic that comes out, and it is now a war economy. It doesn't make anything anyone wants. It didn't, even before this, it didn't have, apart from oil, it doesn't really have anything to export to the world. It has stolen IP. That's pretty much it, that it then sort of makes versions of things that the rest of the world innovates on. And what the EU, I think, can do now, and also sort of other allies of Ukraine, is sort of just try to incentivize, okay, Donald, you've put these tariffs on here. We're now willing to negotiate on these things. He's got a particular bugbear about US car companies' access to the European Union markets. He doesn't quite get that it's because American cars are too big, and American car companies are here in Europe and Britain, but they make different models, smaller models under different brand names, because he's sort of, there are things that I think the Europeans can do, which it's all about incentives and it's got to be economic, and they've got to point out to him very clearly that Russia and you establishing links with them is not really going to do anything for your economy.
This is simple, isn't it? That as we went into the conference, David, there was mention that at the end of the day, Trump just wants to do business with Russia again. It's as simple as that. I mean, the Nobel Peace Prize is like the personal itch that needs to be scratched hard. But the fact is, he's a businessman. He wants to make money.
I think there's a couple things. One, definitely he's a businessman and his personal advantage is big. But the other one is what you were saying about Europe. The Europeans are to Trump sort of like a parent to a teenage child. You know, they'll say the sensible things, and when you're kind of relaxed and the hormones aren't kicking around, you'll listen to them. But Trump loves strong men who are powerful and can thrust forward with nothing blocking them, who can tilt their hand and get anything happen. Putin can grab any oligarch by any part of his body, and that person will do exactly as he wishes. And there's no press to object. Trump's view of these people in China, especially in Russia, it's love. And so that's deep underneath. That'll be a core common drive. And on the surface, occasionally when you back off, try to breathe down and the hormones go down a little bit, he might be aware of these rational things. Oh, this would be economically good or bad for us. But he doesn't pay attention to that.
It's funny the way you position Trump there. You don't position Trump as the strong man himself.
Look at him deep inside. He, as we know, nobody swaggers like that if they're strong. In our lives, we've met intelligent people and militarily brave people. They never brag.
Thank you for that. It's 9:30 here in London. Let's head to Helsinki, where it is 11:30, I believe. Our correspondent Petri Burtsoff is joining the programme. Good morning, Petri.
Good morning, Emma. And apologies if there's some Indian music in the background, because the Indian government has basically rented this entire central park in downtown Helsinki, and you cannot escape the sound. It's quite a lovely event, but yeah, sorry about that.
No, don't apologise for a moment. For starters, we can't hear it. And secondly, why did you choose to go to a park to do a radio interview when you knew that it was going to be filled with an Indian celebration?
I just happen to live next to the park, and as I said, you cannot escape the sound. And I might just go and pop in for some nice South Indian food after this live is over.
Delicious. Wonderful. Well, we wish you a very happy afternoon doing that. Petri, I think we need to sort of start off by before we start going into the subjects that you desperately, you brought to the table for us today. I think we do need to ask you about how Finland reacted to Alaska on Friday.
Yeah, well, I think the reaction has been in line with that of all the other EU nations. Of course, our president, Alexander Stubb, he sort of touts as having a close relationship with Trump, which in a way he does. They're golf buddies, and he has often phone calls scheduled with Trump. But I mean, Finland's policy line is that of the European Union, so it's a mix of sort of concern, but then obviously also relief, because I mean the comments in Helsinki seem to be that nothing really came out of it, and the expectations were that something from Finland's point of view very awful would come out of it. So it's kind of a still wait and see as is the mood in all of Europe, and of course most in Ukraine.
And indeed, in that part of the world where you are a little bit around the corner, there's this story that I think you wanted to talk about the Russian hacking of a Norwegian dam. There is a sense when you go to your part of the world that you really do know who's living next door.
Yes, and I mean I have to comment on the Alaska meeting. It was historically sort of reminded Finland of course, the Molotov-Ribbentrop meeting in the Second World War when the two leaders basically just divided Europe amongst them, and Finland was given to the Soviet Union. So there's there are it reminded Finns a little bit of that meeting. But yeah, this case that you alluded to in Norway, it's quite remarkable. So basically, Norway's security police blames Russia for an attack that took place earlier this week, where they say Russian hackers infiltrated and took control of one of Norway's biggest dams. And actually hijacked it and opened the floodgates for I think it says here 4 hours and managed to let the waters run, discharging the equivalent of 3 Olympic-sized swimming pools before the Norwegians managed to fight back controls. Just goes to show that this is obviously these are allegations, but we know that Russia has engaged in this kind of stuff before, not least in Ukraine. Just goes to show how far they're willing to go in this sabotage, and how successful they also are, that they can take control of critical infrastructures such as a big dam in Norway of all places.
Indeed, I think this is something that's been maybe slightly underestimated by people outside your region. Maybe I should bring David and Vinny in on this one. Petri, we have David Bodanis and Vincent McAviney in the studio with us, so we're all going to pile in now. David, that idea that you can have a very modern phenomenon now where state hackers can, in fact, really go to town on a country's infrastructure and indeed go to the private sector as well.
Easy. It turns out countries have maybe, Norway's not it's geographically large, but population is small, but it might have 10,000 or 40,000 things that everybody will recognize which are significant. Intersections of traffic lights at important places, computers in cars, dams, just thousands and thousands and thousands of things. They're tend to be protected on the individual level. There might be, okay, who's our computer guy dealing with the dam? You think of a dam, you think of civil engineers and hydraulic engineers, and along the way you'll have some computer guy, maybe even a maintenance person from a large company. So all that's diffuse. From Russia, imagine a large sheet of glass which you try to reinforce. Somebody has a big sledgehammer that comes to a diamond-tipped point. So Russia has to simply has to take its absolute best programmers and aim them at this one slot. It's sort of like defending the Atlantic Wall against the Allied invasion. You have to defend 1,000 miles against an invasion that might come at 1 square mile or one tiny area. So it's really, 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 really hard. This is a case where the asymmetry goes against us.
And this, Petri, is something that your part of the world is having to deal with. I mean, we need to think about those, the sabotage of cables connecting Finland and Estonia earlier this year as well. The idea that you can find yourself completely without power through one move.
Exactly. And that has happened on several occasions. And then let's not forget that Estonia, they have for decades now been subjected to Russian cyber attacks, and that's one of the key factors why they've become world leaders in cybersecurity. But we tend to think of cybersecurity as something that takes place in the cyberspace, and they might hack our computers, they might banks need to have world-class cybersecurity. But the fact that they're actually hitting physical infrastructure now, as you said, undersea cables, now this dam, and they've hit power stations, power plants in Ukraine. That's just on an entirely new level compared to what we're used to.
Let's move to Lithuania for the next story that you wanted to talk about, and it's slightly a kind of a sort of a response, a future response to current threats. Raising children in this day and age is quite interesting, given the fact that many parts of the world are currently on a war footing, and while children may not want to directly be educated in fighting, Lithuania is teaching them to build drones.
Exactly. This is remarkable. Happy to continue on this wonderful, positive war stories. But Lithuanian Defense Ministry is basically, they've unveiled a new drone education initiative in Lithuanian schools, starting at as early as third grade and then continuing through 12th grade. And it starts with sort of just kids playing, I guess, I don't know if it's Legos or what it is, but building drones and just understanding what they are. And then moves on as the kids get older. Then it's about piloting the drones. And then actually when they're in high school, it says here, they will be designing a 3D printing drones as well. And it's tens of thousands of students who will go through this program. And they justify this program by defending against Russia. They say that in the future, we have to be prepared to defend against hundreds of thousands of drone attacks. So this is about bolstering their defenses. But we talk about militarization of our societies. It doesn't get more militarized than that if you start teaching third graders how to pilot drones.
Vinny, how do you feel about a bunch of teenagers being allowed to build drones?
I think we're all going to have to get used to it. I mean, there is a fantastic documentary that came out in this country. It was broadcast on the BBC called Ukraine, War in the Woods. And I hadn't fully grasped just how threatening and how game-changing drones are in terms of any kind of ground army positions become entirely vulnerable. It basically is like a video game. And a lot of the machinery that we use, tanks that cost hundreds of thousands of pounds can be taken down by a drone that's less than £100. Even warships can be swarmed by drones, which will confuse their radar and then sort of make them miss an intercept missile that's coming in, for instance. So I think it's something that the big lesson that we have to learn from Ukraine is we've all got to get making drones quite quickly.
Indeed, there's a friend of mine who's a correspondent, was out in Ukraine, and he said you have sort of First World War trench warfare, which is absolutely taken out by the fact that a drone just effectively finishes the game in 1 second, and it becomes a game. David, let me bring you in on the idea of educating a generation of people on a war footing. The idea that, as Petri was talking about, in Lithuania, kids are being taught how to manufacture and build drones, not because it's fun or they might be able to use it for Deliveroo, but because this is actually the country's defence ministry that's doing it.
Correct. There's a good and a bad thing about it. The good thing about it is Lithuanians are really bright, energetic people, and a big active population will do a lot. The population's tiny compared to Russia, but a lot of people in Russia aren't allowed initiative, and that makes a big difference. The negative thing is the following. If you have any country in the world where you're on a war footing, diversity goes down. So opinion polls of undecideds go to about 0 at times of war or times of tension. So you'll get a more uniformity of opinion in countries around the world and less of the chance of fresh new insights coming in.
Petri, let's move on to another story that involves technology in quite a strange way, although I think this is going to be an inevitable part of what's happening in the world now. The Deputy Prime Minister of Sweden has been caught using AI in a speech, which is something that I wonder we're going to have to get a bit more used to. But the interesting part of it is that what came out from the artificial intelligence speechwriting thing was wrong.
Yes, exactly. So this is Sweden's Deputy Prime Minister Ebba Busch. She held a speech at Almedalen, which is Sweden's. It takes place every summer. This political gathering, the main political gathering of the summer. So she gave a speech there, and as part of that speech, she used a quote from a feminist author called Elina Panke, and turns out that quote was completely fabricated made by AI, and then the minister was forced to issue a public apology on social media, calling the what happened extremely unfortunate. But this, of course, the interesting thing and the funny thing is that this is not the first time that this has happened in Sweden. The Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson admitted also recently that nothing sort of criminal about this, but he regularly uses ChatGPT to get second opinions on political decisions, just to sort of explore different perspectives. So, who knows, maybe in a couple of years' time or maybe a couple of months' time, we will have AI chatbots doing politics for us. I don't know. Will it make politics better? Will it make it worse? Who knows? But yeah, that seems to be the direction in which we're headed.
I think we spoke last week about a British MP who has created an AI version of himself, and people are wondering whether actually it does a better job of government. David, you have a point on this one because you talk about leadership and the idea of artificial intelligence now becoming a huge part of things.
Yes, and particularly with what our correspondent was saying about it being a second opinion. So I have friends who work in the writers' rooms in comedy shows in Los Angeles and stuff, and they usually have about 6 or 7 people with one supervisor. And these people are really bright. The quick-witted lines that you get are come from really bright people, and many of them are being fired. And there will be an AI person, AI thing, and one supervisor, and the AI generates stuff as good as the comic guys. So I could imagine somebody thinking of policy judgments, and instead of having whole teams of people, if they trust their own judgment, they'll have this thing come up with suggestions, some of which will be implausible, but will be very good.
Vinny, to bring you in on this one, I mean, the political journalism that you do, and also journalism now, we're finding an awful lot of AI being used in opinion writing. It's absolutely prevalent.
Trickier to do in broadcast, I have to say. You can clone someone's voice and things, but I kind of sense that there might be a little bit of a shift coming towards, in the same way that we now, you've got products which are fair trade, I think that people will start to look for maybe a human-made moniker. You know, they don't want anything that's kind of AI in it because they realise it's taking away jobs from people. And I think there might be a little bit of a swing towards that.
Okay. Petri, final story before we let you loose on the Indian festival. You're drinking an awful lot of water out there.
Yes, and not only the cleanest tap water in the world that we have that we always enjoyed, but it's actually bottled water. And the consumption of bottled mineral water has doubled in Finland over the past decade. This is just a story that really baffles me. And you know, when I say Finland has the cleanest tap water, it's just not me being a proud Finn. This is actually according to the UN water body organization who claims this. But still, you know, regardless of our really clean tap water, Finns are just going all in on bottled waters. But actually, now that I look at this story, bottled water also includes this sort of fizzy, flavored waters that people drink. I do acknowledge they've become a lot popular. But I don't see Finns ever buying stuff like you know, just to name some brands like Evian and you know, like normal water, but in a bottle. I haven't seen that. So when I saw this headline, I was thinking, you know, it's not something that I have personally witnessed. But now that I see that it includes also this flavored water, so then I understand. But still, you know, really, like, you know, I having lived in countries where you can't drink tap water, and then, you know, moving back to Finland and loving the taste of the clean tap water, I just don't understand why you would have to, you know, why would you go for bottled water in this country of all countries?
We'll let you linger on that moment of anger, Petri, and as you go and enjoy your Indian festival. Thank you so much. That was Petri Burtsoff, our Helsinki correspondent from the centre of Helsinki. You're listening to Monocle on Sunday. David Bodanis and Vincent McAviney are my guests. It's 9:45. Vinny, what have you spotted in the papers that you want to talk about?
Interesting story about the African Union making sort of direct representation that schools and institutions around the world should finally ditch the sort of long known about problematic Mercator projection map, which is the one that we'll all have seen, which sort of radically inflates parts of the world and deflates others. So Africa appears much smaller than it should be. Greenland looks much bigger than it is, and it sort of gives a higher prominence because it's not focused on the equator. It sort of shifts so that Europe is the sort of prominent section of the map, and it's saying it entrenches ideas which are in some ways colonial about the sort of dominance of power and where the world is. It's
a big change in the shape of a map, isn't it, David?
Yes, the Mercator ones made terrific sense from European imperialism. You could go in a straight line east to west, and all the angles were correct. But the only way to do it, imagine cutting open an orange and trying to push it flat on a table. It doesn't work if you have like little gaps on the top. To squeeze those gaps to fit together, you'd have to enlarge them. You know that surprising thing. People are often startled. If I'm flying from Madrid to London, why do I go so far from Madrid to New York? Why do I go so far north? Why from London to San Francisco? I seem to be going over the North Pole or something, even though you don't go quite that far. Because the Mercator map is good for sailing on just one east-west, north-south. The reality of a three-dimensional surface on a two-dimensional map, it's never going to fit. So you get distortions. Another distortion, which I really like, from outer space, you can easily see the South Pole as being the top and North America dangling there at the bottom and stuff. Australians should love that. It's really quite as valid. Another map that's wonderful is to put different things at the center. If you put the North Pole at the center, you can sort of, to some extent, understand Russia's security concerns. There's all these big countries around it looming in. If you put the Pacific Ocean at the center, you get a really different view. You get this, wow, we should have supersonic transports, and Japan and California have natural link, and the East Coast, of course, is not connected with the West Coast of the U.S., et cetera, et cetera. We're used to one perspective, largely because the Royal Navy dominated.
Well done, Royal Navy. Does sort of change things for everybody, though, doesn't it? Because if you start to more accurately portray what is actually, beneath our feet, first and foremost, it's a lot of work for the map makers. But secondly, just listening to what David has just said, he's just given about 3 or 4 different versions of the world. Is there an argument to be said that, okay, the Mercator formula is not great, it's not accurate, and it's not right, but it is a standardized way of going about this. I mean, the difficulty is, though, is that you suddenly start getting people who, the African Union, for example, that says this is simply wrong.
Yeah, I think they do have strong arguments on proportions, because it sort of really does warp your sense of where the sort of biggest nations are. I mean, it's, in schools, teachable moment, put both up, explain that this historically is actually, a historical perspective map. This is a more accurate interpretation that we can do in modern times of what the world looks like, and try and use it like that. It is remarkable as well that I didn't realise that the Mercator map is also the map that we all use on sort of Google Maps. That's the one that we look at as well when we look at that. So it has really pervaded all aspects of life. And, in terms of where the focus is, I remember I was started in a British school where you sort of got the sort of what I would say, in my view, traditional view, where you've kind of got America on the left and the rest of the world on the right. I remember going to an American school where suddenly America was centralized in the map, and then the rest of the world was sort of cut in half on either side of it. And I remember thinking that was a really strange decision. But, it's just each nation wants to see itself clearly on the world.
I want to be in the middle, said the map.
People often, in the army in the old days, when maps were physical rather than on screens, people pointed out that battles almost always take place on the margins of two maps.
Really?
Well, because it's really frustrating when you don't have the maps joined together.
Okay, all right. That sort of makes sense. Thank you for that. Let's talk a little bit more about exam results came out this week, in the United Kingdom for A-levels, which is the exam that you take when you're 18 if you're in higher education. And there's been quite a lot of evidence to suggest that the humanities are declining, or are in decline in terms of the choice. STEM subjects is what? Science, technology, economics and maths?
Engineering,
maths.
Like that, yeah.
Sorry about that. You see, I did humanities, and you can tell that there is a decline in the sort of like the communications and the knowledge and the motive part of education. Vinny, do you want to talk about this a bit?
I mean, what's interesting is, in the past 20 years, if you're a student in the UK in particular, you have gone from not paying for tertiary education to paying and then having top-up fees. And now the average, cost of a degree year is about sort of £11,000 to £12,000. And so people are wanting to be able to do subjects where it's tangible, it's very clear, and it has a bigger pathway, or a sort of more secure pathway into employment, because you've also had I was the generation that came out of university around the time of the financial crisis, and that was not a great jobs market. And then you've had a generation that's come out after Brexit, again, not a good graduate jobs market. Pandemic, same thing again. And so you're probably seeing these generations of young people going to university now who've seen older siblings, older family friends, that possibly their parents saying to them, pick a subject which gets you into a really good career, and that one that can travel internationally and gives you flexibility.
Indeed, which makes absolutely total sense.
Yeah.
However, David, when you look at the idea of the humanities, they are effectively the soft power, which is totally so important, because you look at motive, and actually it's that funny thing that feeling is absolutely at the forefront of
Central. Alexander Pope, who was interested in science and not too bad at poetry, said that as a person, we're sort of like a ship sailing along, and our body and facts are the physical part of the ship, but the winds and the choice of direction, that's more the spirit. So the catastrophic problem, suppose everybody did the sciences. I'm not against the sciences. I've had interest and been into that myself a lot. But there's no direction. Science in and of itself doesn't give you direction. Albert Einstein said, who knew about science, our modern technology is like giving a chainsaw, a machine gun to a savage. Scientists might be good people or there might be bad people, but within the science itself, there's no point for discussion about what should be done. The ought question isn't there. So the humanities in the short term might not earn that much and might be not ideal for society in the short term. In the long term, they're indispensable. It's our guide and also our purpose.
And how much do you think we're lacking in that now, Vinny?
Well, I mean, on a UK perspective, creative industries are one of our sort of biggest sectors, increasingly so, but they're still not given the kind of serious thought and respect in some ways that they do deserve. And so if you've got, we are doing interesting things where lower down you've got now T levels, which are equivalent of A levels in terms of the sort of competency and the difficulty. And they are more specialized. So they are in sort of T is for technical. So they are in, some of them are in creative subjects and things like that. So there is at that level a bit more of a sort of push towards treating the creative industries and humanities more seriously. But I think at university, the sort of classic line is, oh yeah, did you do media studies at university in this country? Well, if you don't understand how important a media is, then you've not understood the last decade, because you've not understood how a reality show star can play the media and get to leader of the free world and deciding the fate of a country like Ukraine.
He's got a very good point there, that actually the decisions are made based on humanities. I mean, going right back to, persuasion is Greek, leadership, all the things that actually formulate the world are effectively based on soft skills. What you need is the research and the evidence-based at the back of it, don't you?
And so why scientists will try to do that. They'll try to step back and study ethics or try to work out where to direct it. But in the short term, when you're just going frantic for grades and to get a top result or for decent pay, you will ignore all that. And it's kind of a shame in your late teens and early 20s to miss out these discussions.
Let's talk a little bit finally in the last 3 or 4 minutes of this thing that, this is a sort of like the fundamental, like the bringing together of this, that you have the science of online dating, which is possibly one of the least human things to happen. But you wanted to bring our attention to the fact that if you met your loved one online, you might not love them as much as you could do had you met them in the real world.
Yeah, it's curious. People have found that out. It's I don't know if it's intuitive or not. But so there's been big databases from the dating sites. And the couples that met online tend to last and show marks of affection less than the ones who met in the real world.
When you mean marks of affection, sort of being nice to each other, or do they stay together? What's the problem?
Oh, sorry. So they don't have cameras inside at the breakfast table saying, "How dare you say that about the salt? Don't you realize what the salt meant to my mother?" No, breakups and duration of staying together. Okay. Not that salt is an issue for me, and not that I've had disrespect about my salt issues. I wish to emphasize that it's not a private matter.
We've just gone into David's head for a minute, and it's interesting. Vinny, I mean, this idea of people who meet in the real world and people who meet online not staying together and not the different nature of relationships. What are your thoughts on that one?
I mean, my relationship is one that started online, so interesting take from this piece. I think it's interesting that there is a backlash against these apps, that people are wanting kind of more sort of events, real world events to sort of meet people we've seen, and that might be sort of pushing back on the pandemic. I think the thing these days is ultimately, if it's a numbers game, people spend more time in their career earlier in their lives. They get used to having decisions, making options, particularly for women, of course. Their career in some ways doesn't mean that the traditional reasons for needing a partnership sooner aren't coming into play. And so we've all got a lot more used to a lot more choice in our lives. And part of it, of being in an adult relationship, is realizing sometimes it's not all about your choice, it's about compromise and making the choice that's best for both of you and not just for one of you.
Also, people today can fake online better than a few years ago. So a few years ago, I can imagine it'd be close to perfect. You know what a real conversation is, and you just happen to do it by typing, and then you meet the person in real life. But there's people who will coach you, and bots, of course, who will help you to have really phony responses. You send them out in group things. Some of my female friends have gotten these, not so much dirty responses, but like kind of leading questions and lines, which are sort of almost inevitably draw them in, and they realize, oh my God, I'm getting this from 15 men.
We've all gone a bit Donald Trump in this one, because the Sunday Times article that mentions this, I think we've got about 5 seconds to talk about this, says that men prefer women who are young, thin and clever-ish, don't tell them about your PhD, and women like wealthy and of a similar age. This is what swiping has done to us, and it sort of reinforces a couple of stereotypes, doesn't it?
It does, I think.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. We'll have to leave it there. That's all the time we have for today's programme. The warmest of thanks to all my guests, Tyler Brûlé, Vincent McAviney, David Bodanis and Petri Burtsoff, and to the producers, Desiree Bandley, Mariella Bevan and myself, and our studio engineer, Mariella Bevan, here in London. I'm Emma Nelson. Monocle on Sunday returns next week. We're in Zurich, but until then, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Goodbye. Thank you very much for listening.